A 5-year-old girl walks onto a billionaire's stage and stops his speech with one calm sentence. Cameras flash. The crowd freezes. She isn't crying, she's certain. Her blue eyes match his. And when she asks why he left her mother behind, his perfect life cracks in public. The Orpheum Metropolitan Theater glowed like a jewel box, golden balconies, velvet seats, chandeliers bright enough to make every smile look earned. Tonight was the Integrity Summit. 2,000 guests, 12 cameras, one man at the center of it all. Julian Ashford, 41, strode across the stage like he owned the air itself, tall, tailored charcoal suit, calm eyes that had stared down boardrooms and won. His empire ran logistics, clean tech, and medical grants across a dozen countries. His foundation funded children's hospitals' literacy programs, Hope, with a polished logo. He spoke into the mic with a voice built for headlines. Ethics isn't branding, Julian said. It's what you do when no one's watching. Applause moved through the audience like a wave. People nodded. People filmed. People believed. Julian lifted a hand, measured, confident. You can't preach humanity if you don't practice it at home. And then a small figure appeared in the center aisle. A little girl about 5 in a simple blue dress and shiny black shoes. Blonde hair in tidy braids, a ribbon slightly crooked, like a child had dressed herself with serious intention. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked with the steady focus of someone who had rehearsed courage in silence. 2 security guards hesitated because she was a child, and because a female usher near her nodded gently, as if guiding her forward. Julian's eyes flicked down the aisle. His speech kept going for one more sentence, pure muscle memory, until the girl reached the stage steps. The cameras found her instantly. The theater held its breath, and Julian Ashford, who never lost control, felt the first thin crack appear in his perfect night. The little girl climbed the side steps carefully, one hand lightly on the railing. The usher stayed close, present, calm, protective, letting the child lead, but never letting her be alone. Julian stepped back half a pace, still wearing his public smile. He leaned toward the mic, lowering his voice into something gentle. Hey there, sweetheart. Are you with someone? The girl reached the top step and stood where the stage lights washed her in soft gold. Her eyes were startling, icy blue, clear as winter sky. She looked straight at him. Not the cameras, not the crowd. Him. My name is Lila Vale, she said, clear and careful, as if she'd practiced each syllable. I came because I saw you on TV. A ripple of whispers. Phones rose higher. Julian kept his tone warm. Okay. Lila, do you know where your mom is? The usher spoke quietly from behind for the microphone to catch. Sir, her mother is aware. She's safe. She asked for permission to speak. Julian's throat tightened. Lila took one step forward. The sound of her shoes on the stage was tiny, yet somehow louder than applause. You said people should do the right thing, Lila said, even when it's hard. Julian swallowed. Yes, he answered, slow. That's what I believe. Lila's small hands clenched once, then released. A child steadying herself. Then I need to ask you something, she said. The theater turned into silence so complete it felt like pressure. Lila lifted her chin, and her voice came out gentle but sharp in its innocence. Why did you leave my mom when she was expecting me? One sentence. No screaming, no accusation with rage. Just a child asking a question like it was a missing piece of her world. Julian's smile didn't fall. It froze. The flash of cameras stuttered like lightning. Julian's mind raced for a safe exit, a joke, a redirect, a PR line. His instincts screamed, control it. He forced his voice steady. Lila, I'm not sure I understand. Lila didn't move. Her gaze stayed locked, unwavering, as if she was confirming something only she could feel. My mom's name is Marin Vale, she said. She told me, sometimes grown-ups get scared and go away. A quiet murmur traveled across the room. Marin Vale meant nothing to them, but the shape of a secret did. Julian's assistant, Sloane Park, 36, hovered at the stage edge, eyes wide, already calculating headlines. Julian tried to keep the moment humane. "Sweetheart, I don't want you to feel confused up here. This is a big room." "I'm not confused," Lila said softly. Then she did something small, devastating in its simplicity. She pointed to her own face. "I have your eyes," she said. A tremor passed through Julian's chest, because it wasn't just the color. It was the shape, the stillness. That particular look like the world could shout, and the eyes would keep listening. Julian's stomach dipped as memory clawed upward a rainy street, a laugh in a small kitchen, warm hands around a mug, a woman who didn't ask for his money, only his honesty. He pushed the thought down hard. He looked straight into the main camera and made the mistake that sounded clean, but landed cold. "This appears to be a misunderstanding," Julian said. "A child shouldn't be used for." Lila's brows pulled together, not in anger, just in hurt confusion. "Nobody used me," she said. "I asked the usher lady if I could speak. I wanted to ask you like a grown-up." The usher gently touched Lila's shoulder support without pressure. Julian felt the entire room measuring him. He lowered his voice again, stepping closer, careful not to intimidate. "Lila, I hear you, and I'm glad you're safe, but I don't know your mother." Lila's mouth opened then closed as if she'd expected a different answer. She took one breath. "My mom keeps her phone quiet," Lila said. "When she comes home tired. She thinks I'm asleep, but I hear her." Julian's eyes tightened. "She says," Lila continued, voice smaller now that she was brave once, "and she doesn't want to be brave like that again." A hush. Not pain as spectacle, just truth spoken gently. Lila looked at him one last time. "You don't have to talk to me here," she said. "But could you talk to my mom?" "Please." Julian's lips parted. For the first time in decades, he didn't have a rehearsed answer. Sloane stepped forward smoothly, voice calm, professional kind. "Thank you, Lila," she said warmly. "You were very brave and very respectful." The usher guided Lila back toward the steps, careful and steady. The child didn't resist. She didn't dramatize. She simply walked away the way she arrived, quiet courage wrapped in a small blue dress. Julian watched her go. His lungs felt too tight. He turned to the audience, gripping the podium as if it could keep him upright. We'll take a brief intermission." Murmurs broke into conversation. The room buzzed with theories, soft, hungry, relentless. Backstage, the hallway lights were harsh and real. Julian moved quickly, not running, but close, like a man trying to outrun a shadow. Sloane caught up phone vibrating in her hand. The clip is already spreading. Julian didn't look at her. Was she safe? Yes. She came with an usher from the youth program. There's an adult guardian listed on the sign-in. No laws broken. Everything is clean. And still Julian felt stained. He stopped in a small green room. On the wall, a framed photo of him cutting a ribbon at a children's hospital, smiling, praised, applauded. The irony hit like a dull punch. Sloane spoke carefully. "We can frame this as a misunderstanding." A child confused by no. Julian said too fast. Sloane blinked. Sir Julian rubbed his palm over his jaw, the first sign of nerves anyone ever saw from him. She wasn't confused. Sloane softened her tone. "Do you know the name?" the child said. "Marin Vale." Julian stared at the floor. He hadn't heard that name in years. He had buried it in acquisitions and press releases and moving on. But his body remembered before his pride did. "I need facts," Julian said. "Not spin." Sloane hesitated. "PR will want a statement." Julian's voice went low, controlled, dangerous in its calm. "I don't want a statement. I want the truth." He turned to her fully. "Find out who she is," he said. "And find out if I'm connected." Sloane nodded once, already moving. "I'll do it discreetly. Legally. Carefully. Julian sat down, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. A billionaire in a private room, shaken by a 5-year-old's polite question. Outside, the crowd roared with curiosity. Inside, Julian Ashford heard only 2 words in his head. I have your eyes. The next morning, dawn washed the city in pale silver. Julian arrived at his office before sunrise. The building was glass and quiet, an empire still sleeping. Sloane appeared at 6:40 a.m., with a folder so ordinary it looked harmless. But her face wasn't ordinary. I verified through public records and legal channels, she said. Nothing invasive, nothing improper. Julian didn't sit. Say it. Sloane opened the folder. Lila Vale, age 5, born in April, lives with her mother Marin Vale, 29, in a modest apartment near Harborline Industrial District. Julian's chest tightened. Marin, Sloane continued gently. Marin works 2 jobs, day shift at a family diner, evening shift at a late-night cafe. She's stable, responsible. Lila is enrolled in school. No red flags. Julian swallowed. And father listed. Sloane's eyes dropped to the page. No father listed on the birth certificate. Silence, not dramatic, just heavy. Sloane turned 1 page. I cross-checked dates. Lila was born approximately 9 months after your relationship with Marin ended. Julian's stomach turned slow cold. He walked to the window, looking down at streets where people hurried with coffee cups and ordinary lives. He had spent years convincing himself the past was finished. But the past had just walked onto a stage and spoken politely into a microphone. Sloane's voice was careful. Do you want legal counsel before you? Julian cut in quiet. Get the car. Sir, get the car, he repeated, softer now, but absolute. And arrange a private paternity test the right way, with consent, with a lawyer present if needed. Sloane nodded. Yes. Julian closed his eyes. He pictured Lila's braids, her blue dress, the way she asked instead of accused. He didn't feel attacked. He felt called. And for the first time in his life, Julian Ashford feared what the truth might demand from him. The drive to Harborline was only 40 minutes, but the city changed like a story turning pages. Glass towers faded into older brick. Clean sidewalks became patched concrete. Fancy cafes became corner stores with handwritten signs. Julian stood outside apartment 2C, holding the weight of years in one breath. He knocked once, then again. The door opened. Marin Vale stood there in a diner uniform, faded yellow name tag slightly scratched. Her hair was pulled into a practical bun. Her eyes were brown, steady, and tired in a way money couldn't touch. She didn't gasp. She didn't shout. She simply looked at him like she already knew the world was capable of disappointing her. Julian, she said. Not a greeting. A fact. He lowered his voice. Marin, may I come in? She hesitated just long enough to show she still had a choice. Then she stepped aside. The apartment was small but clean. A worn sofa, a table with crayons, a small bookshelf. On the wall, drawings, mostly 2 figures holding hands. Mother and daughter. No villain. No humiliation. Just absence. Marin folded her arms. Lila is in school, safe, supervised, and yes, she spoke last night with my permission. The youth program invited her class to the summit. I didn't know she would step onto the stage. Julian's throat tightened. I never want her unsafe. Ever. Marin's gaze sharpened, then start by not making her a spectacle. Julian nodded once, the first honest surrender he'd made in years. I came to listen, and to do this properly. He swallowed. I want a paternity test, he said, with consent, with lawyers, with dignity. Marin's expression didn't soften, but something shifted, an old pain meeting a new seriousness. Fine, she said. But understand this. Julian waited. Marin spoke slowly, each word controlled. Lila doesn't need a billionaire. She needs a man who shows up. They sat at the tiny kitchen table, 2 mugs, 1 old coffee maker, a silence full of history. Julian stared at his hands. I didn't know. Marin's laugh was small and bitter, not cruel, just exhausted. That's convenient. He looked up. It's true. Marin leaned back, eyes steady. Do you want the whole story? Julian, yes. Marin's voice stayed calm because calm was how you survive when you've been disappointed too many times. 6 years ago, she said I was going to marry you. I believed you. Julian's jaw tightened, and then Marin continued. I saw you with Tessa Wynne, in your penthouse, a week before the wedding. Julian's chest tightened. I was drunk. I was weak. It was the worst thing I've ever done. Marin's eyes didn't flinch. I didn't leave because I wanted drama. I left because I needed dignity. Julian nodded, swallowing guilt. Marin took a slow breath. I found out I was pregnant a week after I left. I didn't call you. Why? Julian asked, voice raw. Marin's answer was quiet and deadly honest. Because I didn't want my child learning how to beg for love. Julian's eyes burned. I would have tried. Would you? Marin asked. Or would you have tried until it got hard? Julian had no quick defense. Marin stood and rinsed a mug, hands moving from habit. When Lila started asking about her father, I told her the truth in a child-sized way. That grown-ups can make choices that hurt people. That it wasn't her fault. Julian's voice broke slightly. And when she saw me on TV... Marin nodded. She stared at the screen and said, Mom, he has my eyes. Julian closed his eyes. Marin continued, softer now. She asked if she could speak. The youth program leader asked me. I said yes with conditions. An usher stayed with her. She would not be alone. She would not be pressured. Julian nodded. Thank you for protecting her. Marin's eyes held his. I protect her every day. The question is, can you? The clinic was private, lawful, quiet. No paparazzi. No spectacle. Julian signed papers with a hand that didn't shake until he saw the child consent forms and realized how strange it was that he had to be introduced to fatherhood through paperwork. Marin sat beside him, posture straight, expression unreadable. They didn't touch. They didn't argue. They moved like 2 people carrying fragile glass. 3 days later, Sloane returned with a sealed envelope. Julian stared at it like it could bite. Marin didn't speak. Sloane placed it on the table. This is confidential. Handled correctly. Julian nodded and slid a finger under the seal. He read, Probability of paternity 99.99%. The office went silent. Julian didn't collapse. He didn't perform. He simply sat there, breath shallow, like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was different than he thought. Marin's face didn't change, but her eyes, softened by a fraction, then hardened again as if softness was dangerous. Julian lifted his gaze. She's my daughter. Marin nodded once. Yes, Julian swallowed. I can't get the last 5 years back. No, Marin said. You can't. His voice went low. But I can stop making it worse. Marin watched him carefully, as if listening for the old Julian excuses, control, arrogance. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered. May I meet her? He said as her father slowly, respectfully on her terms. Marin's answer came after a long pause. She's a child, Marin said, so her terms are simple. Julian waited. Marin's eyes held his. Don't promise what you won't keep. Julian nodded, throat tight. I won't. Marin stood to leave, then stopped at the door. She likes drawing, she said, and she notices everything. Julian's voice was almost a whisper. I'll be careful. Marin looked back once. Careful isn't enough, she said. Be present. Saturday, 2:00 p.m. Julian arrived in a simple sweater and jeans, no suit armor, no stage voice. His car was expensive, but he parked it 2 streets away anyway, as if humility could be practiced in small choices. Marin opened the door. "She's excited," Marin said, then added with a warning softness and cautious. Inside, Lila sat on the sofa in a pink dress with tiny flowers. Her braids were neat. Her hands were folded like she'd seen adults do when something mattered. Her blue eyes lifted. Julian's breath caught. "Hi," he said, voice too formal, then softer. "Hi, Lila. I'm Julian." Lila blinked slowly. "I know." Of course she did. Julian sat in an armchair, leaving space like respect. "Your mom said you like drawing." Lila nodded. "And puzzles. And books." Julian smiled gently. "That's excellent taste." Marin watched from the kitchen doorway, present but not hovering, protective without suffocating. Lila tilted her head. "Do you live in a tall building?" "I do," Julian said. "But it doesn't have a yard." Lila's shoulders drooped a fraction. "I want a yard one day." Julian's chest tightened. "What would you do with a yard?" Lila's face brightened. "Plant flowers and make a little tea party outside." Julian nodded. "That sounds perfect." Lila studied him like she was reading the truth in his pauses. "Do you work a lot?" Julian hesitated. Honest answers felt heavier than money. "Yes," he said. "I do." Lila's voice stayed gentle. "Mom works a lot too, but when she's home, she's here." The sentence wasn't an accusation. It was a child's observation. Julian swallowed. "You're right." Lila stood and walked to her room, returning with a folder of drawings. She placed them on the coffee table like sacred documents. "This is me," she said. "This is Mom." Julian's throat tightened. "And this," Lila added, pointing to a third stick figure, small near the edge, "is you. I drew you after the theater." Julian's eyes burned. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He said something better. "Thank you for saving a space for me," he whispered. Lila sat on the rug and patted the spot beside her. Julian hesitated, the old instinct to stay polished, then lowered himself down. The rug was small. His knees complained. His ego did too. Lila handed him a green crayon. "Draw a tree," she instructed, like a teacher with a very serious student. Julian tried. The tree looked wrong. Lila stared for a second, then laughed, bright, clean, surprised laughter. "It looks like broccoli," she giggled. Julian looked at his tragic tree and laughed, too quiet at first, then real. The sound shocked him. It felt unfamiliar, like an unused room in his chest opening up. Lila scooted closer and gently corrected his drawing with small, confident strokes. Her fingers brushed his. Warm, light, certain. Julian froze, because touch from a child is pure, and purity makes grown-ups confront what they've wasted. Lila glanced up, voice soft. "Are you okay?" Julian swallowed. "Yes. I'm learning." Lila nodded as if that made sense. "Learning is good." Marin watched from the doorway, arms folded, but her gaze softened when she saw Julian stay on the floor instead of trying to lead the moment. They drew for an hour. Houses, flowers, a swing. Lila's version was always hopeful, big sky, bright windows, 2 people holding hands. Julian's phone buzzed once. He didn't touch it. It buzzed again. He glanced, then turned it face down. Lila noticed anyway. She noticed everything. "Is your phone always loud?" she asked. Julian's mouth tightened. "Sometimes." Lila's voice stayed gentle. "When I'm with someone I like, I want them to be here." Julian nodded, pain and gratitude mixing. "That's fair." At the end, Lila held up their paper. "Our tree is better now," she said proudly. Julian stared at the drawing, like it was a contract he finally wanted to sign. "Yeah," he said, "it is." And when Lila leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, just for a second, Julian felt the kind of wealth no magazine had ever listed. Julian stood by the door, tying his shoes slowly like time could be stretched if he moved carefully enough. Lila followed him, small footsteps behind his. "You're leaving?" she asked. "I have to," Julian said honestly. "But I want to come back." Lila's eyes searched his face. When Julian glanced at Marin, asking permission without forcing it, Marin's tone was neutral, protective. "Only if you mean it." Julian nodded. "Next Saturday, same time. And I'll bring a puzzle." Layla smiled, then caught herself as if smiling was a risk now. She was learning. Marin's gaze sharpened at the corner of his phone. "Keep it quiet." "I will," Julian said. Outside, Julian walked to his car with a strange ache, like he'd stepped into sunlight, and realized he'd been living under fluorescent lights his whole life. At home, he tried to return to normal. He couldn't. He stared at spreadsheets and saw crayons. He heard boardroom voices and heard Lila say, "Learning is good." Saturday came again. Julian arrived with a simple puzzle in a plain paper bag, as if simplicity could prove sincerity. Lila ran to the door, and the way she hugged him, quick, shy, sincere, nearly broke him. They built the puzzle on the floor. Julian's phone rang once. He ignored it. It rang again. He silenced it. It rang a third time. He didn't even look. Lila's eyes widened. "You didn't answer." Julian's throat tightened. "Because you're more important." Lila smiled a small, brave smile. Marin watched, saying nothing, but her posture eased. Julian felt hope spark. Then the next week happened. A crisis meeting ran long. A client threatened to pull out, Sloane called with urgency. Julian arrived late 3:30 p.m. Lila stood by the window. She didn't cry. She just looked smaller. "You're late," she said. Julian crouched, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm sorry," Lila nodded slowly. "It's okay." But her voice sounded like a child practicing disappointment. On the fourth visit, Julian noticed the pattern forming like a bruise. Arrive late. Leave early. Phone in hand like a leash. Lila still drew with him, still smiled sometimes. Yet something had changed. She was careful with her joy now, as if joy needed permission. Julian sat on the rug watching her sort crayons by color. "I want to do better," he said quietly. Lila didn't look up. "Okay." That okay wasn't cold. It was cautious. Julian felt it land. He swallowed. "Next Saturday. I'll come at 10 a.m. We'll spend the whole day together." Lila's head lifted so fast her braids bounced. "The whole day," she whispered. Julian nodded. "The whole day. No work. No phone." His thumb hovered. He answered. "Julian, we have a problem," Grant said. "We need you now." Julian's voice tightened. "I have an appointment at 10. This can't wait," Grant insisted. "If we lose this, we lose everything." Julian closed his eyes. He told himself, "I'll fix it fast. I'll still go. I'll be a little late." He didn't call Marin immediately, because saying the truth out loud would make it real. And that was the first crack. At 8 a.m., Lila woke up early, too excited to sleep. She ran into Marin's room in pajamas, hair, messy, face bright. "Mommy," she whispered loudly, "he's coming today." Marin smiled gently, careful not to inflate a fragile thing. At 10, Lila treated 10 o'clock like a holiday. She bathed, brushed her teeth twice, chose her favorite blue dress with white flowers, the one she saved for special. Marin braided her hair with yellow ribbons. "Do I look pretty?" Lila asked. "You look beautiful," Marin answered, kissing her forehead. In the living room, Lila lined up toys like a welcome committee. Books stacked neatly, crayons sorted, puzzle pieces ready. "This is where we'll play house," she explained, pointing proudly. "He can be the daddy, and I can be the daughter. The real one." Marin's chest tightened, but she kept her face calm. At 9:30, Lila sat by the window, legs swinging. At 10, she sat straighter. At 10:15, she made excuses. "Maybe traffic," she said. At 10:30, she leaned forward, scanning every car. At 11, the phone rang. Lila jumped up like electricity. Marin answered. Julian's voice came through careful and strained. Marin, I can explain. Marin's stomach dropped. Where are you? I'm in an emergency meeting. Lila clutched Marin's shirt, whispering, Is Daddy coming? Julian's voice lowered. The deal, there's a legal issue. Marin's tone stayed controlled, but steel slid underneath. You promised, I know, Julian said. But this is important. Marin's eyes closed for a second, because anger could burn, but disappointment was colder. How do you explain important to a 5-year-old? She asked, voice low. Julian swallowed. I'll make it up to her. Marin's voice sharpened. No, don't say that. She's not a calendar you reschedule. She ended the call. Lila looked up, eyes wide, trying to stay brave. He's not coming, she asked softly. Marin knelt gentle hands on Lila's shoulders. Not today. Lila nodded slowly. Then she walked back to the window and sat down again. Maybe later, she whispered. Marin looked at her daughter and felt something inside her harden, not against Julian's money, against Julian's unreliability. The hours moved like slow water. Lila stayed near the window, sometimes wandering to her toys, then returning like hope had its own gravity. At noon, she asked, Can I eat here so I don't miss him? Marin made a sandwich. Lila ate half. At 2 o'clock, Lila said, Maybe he's buying something. At 4 o'clock, she stopped pretending. She sat on the sofa, hands in her lap, voice small. Mommy, do you think he doesn't like me? The question wasn't dramatic. It was worse because it was sincere. Marin's heart clenched. She hugged Lila close. He likes you, Marin said. This isn't about you. Lila stared at her own fingers. People who like us don't break promises, she whispered, as if reciting a rule she'd just discovered. Marin didn't lie. She answered carefully. Sometimes adults make bad choices. Lila nodded slowly. Big choices. At 6 o'clock, Lila put her toys away one by one, neat and quiet. She folded her special dress and changed into pajamas. I'm not waiting anymore, she said, voice calm. Marin tucked her in. Lila's eyes kept drifting toward the door. What if he comes when I'm asleep? Lila asked. Marin brushed her hair gently. If he comes, I'll wake you. I promise. Lila blinked. Do you really promise? Yes, Marin said softly. I do. Lila finally closed her eyes. But even in sleep, her face turned toward the door, as if listening for footsteps. Marin stood in the dark hallway, breathing through a pain she refused to show her child. Not because she was hiding truth, because she was protecting Lila's dignity. Sunday morning, Julian called again. I can explain. I don't want explanations, Marin said quietly. I want consistency. Julian's voice broke. How do I fix this? Marin's answer was cold in its honesty. I don't know if you can. Then she said the line that changed everything. If you can't be steady, don't be present at all. Julian went silent, and Marin, strong, exhausted, loyal to her child, hung up with hands that trembled. Not from fear, from the weight of always having to be the adult. Monday morning, Julian arrived at Ashford Tower to a wall of cameras. Reporters clustered at the entrance like a living question. Is it true? You have a daughter? Did you deny her publicly? Is your philanthropy a facade? Julian walked through without speaking, jaw tight, shoulders squared. Inside his office, Sloan waited with newspapers spread across his desk. The ethics tycoon's private failure billionaire preaches integrity, breaks a child's trust. Sloan's voice was controlled. 2 million views on the clip. Sponsors are nervous. Julian didn't look at the headlines. He looked at the drawing Lila had given him, now framed on a shelf behind his desk. A tree, a swing, 2 figures holding hands. His phone buzzed with corporate fires. For the first time, he felt the truth. He had built a machine that ate time. And now that machine was chewing on his daughter's heart. At 10 a.m. the door opened. A man entered like old authority. Conrad Ashford, 73, Julian's father. Silver hair, immaculate suit, eyes like stone polished into elegance. "We need solutions," Conrad said. "Not emotions." Julian's jaw tightened. "Lila is my daughter." Conrad waved a hand dismissively. "That's not the issue. The issue is perception." Julian stared. Perception. Conrad sat crossing his legs. "Handle it discreetly. Provide financial support. Keep public distance. Let time erase it." Julian's voice went low. "Erase my child." Conrad's gaze sharpened. "Julian, do you know how many jobs depend on your stability? How many families? My daughter is a family," Julian cut in. Conrad leaned forward. "You can't sacrifice the empire for a mistake." Julian's eyes narrowed. Emily's question echoed in his head. "People who like us don't break promises, right?" He looked at his father and felt something ice-cold settle in his stomach. "Why are you so desperate to control this?" Julian asked quietly. "What do you know that I don't?" Conrad's face shifted just a fraction. A crack. Julian leaned in. "Dad," he said. "What did you do 6 years ago?" Conrad's lips pressed together. He stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city like it belonged to him. "Sometimes," Conrad said, "to protect the people we love, we make difficult choices." Julian's voice sharpened. "Answer me." Conrad turned slowly. "I knew about Marin's pregnancy," he admitted. Julian's chest went tight. "You knew." "She came to me first," Conrad said, calm as if it were nothing. "She was scared. She wanted guidance." Julian's hands curled into fists. "And you told her what?" Conrad's eyes didn't soften. "I told her you weren't ready, that a child would derail your future." Julian stepped forward, voice shaking. "You had no right to speak for me." "I did," Conrad replied. "I'm your father." Julian's heartbeat thundered. "Is that why she disappeared?" Conrad hesitated. Julian saw it. "What else?" Julian demanded. Conrad exhaled like he was bored. "I arranged a test." Julian's eyes narrowed. "A test," the secretary Conrad said. "Tessa Wynne. I encouraged her. I wanted Marin to see what kind of man you were." Julian went still. "You set me up," he whispered. Conrad shrugged. "You still chose." Julian's breath came shallow. He had spent years blaming himself, burying the guilt, building an empire as penance he never named. And now his father was calmly confessing to pulling the strings. Julian's voice turned deadly quiet. "You destroyed my chance at a family," he said. Conrad's tone stayed flat. "I saved your future." Julian stared at the man who had taught him discipline, legacy control. And for the first time, Julian saw it clearly. It wasn't love. It was ownership. Julian stepped back as if he needed distance to breathe. Conrad adjusted his cufflinks. "So, are we done with the past? Handle the present? Keep it quiet." Julian's eyes lifted, burning. "No," he said. Conrad frowned. No, Julian's voice didn't shake now. "I'm done letting you decide what matters." Conrad's expression hardened. "Julian, be rational." Julian laughed once, sharp, humorless. "Rational," he repeated, tasting the word like poison. "You mean convenient." Conrad stepped closer. "You'll ruin your reputation." Julian's gaze didn't move. "Good." Conrad blinked, thrown off. "Excuse me," Julian's voice turned steady, quiet power, not stage power. "I built my reputation on speeches about integrity," he said. "And then a 5-year-old asked me a polite question. And I realized I've been living a lie." Conrad's eyes narrowed. "This is weakness." Julian stepped to his desk and picked up Lila's framed drawing. He held it like evidence. "This," Julian said, "is not weakness," Conrad scoffed. "You're sentimental." Julian looked up, eyes cold. "You're afraid." Conrad's jaw tightened. Afraid of what? Julian leaned forward. afraid that I'll choose love over control. Conrad's voice rose. Love doesn't pay payroll. Julian's reply was immediate. Neither does cruelty. Silence slammed the room. Conrad took a slow breath. If you do this publicly, if you attach the Ashford name to this scandal, she already has my eyes, Julian cut in. And she has my blood. My name is the least I can give her. Conrad's voice dropped. Then you're on your own, Julian stared at him. I've been on my own, he said. I just didn't know it. Conrad walked to the door, pausing with one last attempt at control. You'll regret this, he said. Julian's voice stayed calm. Maybe. But this time it will be my regret. Not yours. Conrad left. The door clicked shut. Julian stood alone in a room full of luxury, suddenly feeling how empty it all was. He picked up his phone. Not to call PR, to call Marin. She answered with cautious silence. Marin, Julian said. I need to tell you something. All of it. Her voice was guarded. Why now? Because I finally know why you never believed me, Julian said. And because I'm done hiding. He told her carefully, without drama, about Conrad's confession, about the test, about the manipulation. Marin's breath caught on the line. That's, she whispered. That's insane. It is, Julian said. And it doesn't excuse me. I still chose poorly. I still hurt you. Marin's voice tightened. So what do you want? Julian's throat worked. I want to stop being a visitor in my daughter's life. Marin said nothing. Julian continued, voice steady but raw. I'm going to acknowledge Lila publicly, not for the cameras, for her. Marin's tone sharpened. And what happens after the headlines fade, after you get bored of being redeemed? Julian's answer came without hesitation. I changed my life, he said. Not my schedule, my life. Marin's silence was long. Then she spoke low and firm. If you do this, she said, you don't get to be halfway. Lila comes first. Julian closed his eyes. I know, he whispered. That's the point. Julian arrived at Marin's apartment with a folder of documents, but his face held no arrogance this time. Marin opened the door, posture, guarded eyes, watchful. Lila's at school, she said. I know, Julian replied. I came to talk to you. They sat at the kitchen table again, the same small space where the truth always felt bigger. Julian slid a document across the table. Marin glanced down. Her hands stilled. Updated birth certificate, Julian said quietly. Lila is officially registered as my daughter. Marin's eyes lifted, shocked despite herself. You did this without telling me. Julian nodded. Because regardless of what you decide about me, she deserves the legal security. He slid another document forward. A trust fund, he said, managed independently, for education, health stability. No strings. Marin's voice went cold. Do you think money fixes what you broke? Julian met her gaze. No. I think money removes fear. It's not love, but it's protection. He took a breath, then added something softer. And I'm also stepping down from daily operations. I'm restructuring leadership. I'm making room. Marin stared at him. For her, she asked. For her, Julian answered. Marin's eyes tightened, emotion threatening behind control. Do you know how many nights she asked about you? Julian's throat tightened. I can guess. Marin leaned forward, voice low. Not guess. All of them. Julian swallowed hard. Marin continued, steady but shaking underneath. Do you know what she asked me after you didn't show up? Julian's voice broke. What Marin's eyes glistened. She asked if you didn't like her. Julian's face tightened like he'd been hit. Marin didn't let him escape into guilt theatrics. She didn't scream, Marin said. She didn't tantrum. She just got quieter. And that's when a mother gets scared. Julian nodded, tears threatening but contained. I'm sorry. Marin shook her head. Sorry doesn't rewind time. I know, Julian whispered. So I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to earn trust. Marin leaned back, exhaling. If I agree, she said, it's with conditions. Julian nodded. Name them. Marin's voice became law. Condition 1, Lila comes first. Always, Julian replied instantly. Yes. Condition 2. No grand promises, only actions. Julian nodded. Yes. Condition 3. If you disappoint her again, if I see her shrinking because of you, it's over. Julian's jaw tightened. I understand. Marin's eyes held him. Do you really? She asked. Julian's answer was quiet. I'm terrified, he said, because I don't know how to be a father, but I know how to be present, and I can learn the rest. Marin looked away toward the wall where Lila's drawings lived. Then she said softer, I need time. Julian nodded. Take it. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Marin, he said, voice low. Thank you for protecting her. You did what I didn't. Marin didn't speak, but her eyes softened just enough to be hope. Thursday, 2:00 p.m. The same hotel ballroom where Julian once delivered polished speeches about ethics now filled with journalists hungry for collapse. Cameras, microphones, bright lights. Julian walked onto the stage without slides, without applause, cues, without music. Just a microphone. Just the truth. He wore a simple navy suit, no power tie, no shine. He stood still until the room quieted. Thank you for coming, Julian began, voice steady. A few weeks ago, a brave 5-year-old girl stepped onto a stage and asked me a question I couldn't answer. Camera flashes popped. Julian continued, eyes level. Her name is Lila Vale, and she is my daughter. A ripple surged through the room. A paternity test confirmed it, Julian said. But I didn't need paper to recognize what I saw in her eyes. He paused. For 5 years, Lila grew up without a father. Not because she wasn't worthy, because of my choices. Reporters leaned in. Julian didn't dodge. I was engaged to her mother, Marin Vale, he said. I betrayed her trust. I failed. And when she left, I didn't fight the way a good man should. He took a breath. I built a public image of integrity, he continued, while privately avoiding responsibility. That is hypocrisy. A journalist called out, Is this an image repair stunt? Julian looked directly at the cameras. If I wanted a strategy, he said, I'd say something softer. I'm not here to soften it. He lifted a sheet of paper. Lila has been legally registered as my daughter. She has every right and protection she deserves. He set it down. I've also created an educational fund in her name, managed independently for her future. Typing exploded. Julian raised a hand. But money is not the point. Silence grew again. The point is this, he said. A child does not need a perfect man. She needs a present one. His voice tightened, but he didn't perform tears. So I'm changing my life, Julian said. Not as a statement, as a decision. I'm stepping back from day-to-day control. I will reduce my schedule. I will show up. A reporter asked, Why should anyone believe you? Now Julian answered, without defensiveness. You shouldn't, he said. Belief is earned, not demanded. He paused, then said the line that hit hardest. To Marin, I'm not asking for forgiveness from a microphone. I'm asking for time to prove I'm safe for my daughter's heart. The room stayed quiet because even cynical journalists know when a man stops selling and starts confessing. Julian stepped back from the mic. I'm not asking the public to clap, he said. I'm asking myself to change. And for the first time, his silence felt more powerful than any speech. A week later, Julian stood in front of a simple 2-story house on a quiet street, trees, sidewalks, kids' bicycles leaning against fences. Not a mansion, a home. Marin held the keys like they were too heavy to trust. It's in your name, Julian said. No conditions. Marin's eyes narrowed. Why Julian's voice was soft. Because Lila wanted a yard, and because you shouldn't have to fight so hard just to breathe. They opened the door. Fresh paint. Simple furniture. A kitchen table big enough for meals and homework and ordinary life. Lila ran through the rooms like wonder had legs. "My room has a garden window," she shouted from upstairs. She raced back down. "Is there a yard?" Julian smiled. "Come see." Outside, Lila froze for one perfect second, then burst into motion. Green grass, a flower bed ready for planting, a sturdy swing under a branch like a promise. Lila dropped onto the grass arms, spread staring at the sky. "I can see the whole sky," she laughed. Julian watched her with a lump in his throat. Marin stepped beside him, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Julian shook his head. "Don't thank me. It's late." Marin's gaze stayed guarded. "Late doesn't mean useless." Julian looked at her. "I found out my father manipulated things 6 years ago." Marin's face tightened in shock. Julian told her again gently without dramatizing. Just truth, clean and clear. Marin's eyes shimmered. "So it wasn't only you." Julian's voice turned firm. "It was still me. I still chose. I still hurt you." Marin didn't pull away when Julian carefully took her hand, asking with touch instead of claiming. "I don't want a life of appearances," Julian said quietly. "I want something real." Marin studied him. "Time," she said, cautious. "Only time." Before he could answer, Lila ran up, breathless. "Daddy," she said naturally now, like she was trying the word on for size. "Come see, there's a little tree I can climb." Marin's eyes flicked to Julian. A silent question. "Show me." Julian nodded. "I'm coming," he told Lila. And he ran not fast like a boy, but eager like a man, finally learning what mattered. Evening folded over the yard in warm gold. Lila sat on the swing legs, pumping laughter bright and clean. Julian stood behind her hands, steady on the ropes. Not a speech, not a headline. Just a father pushing a swing. Marin watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself, letting hope in carefully, like opening a window in winter. Lila slowed, then stopped. She looked up at Julian with those blue eyes, the same eyes. "Daddy," she asked softly, "you're not leaving today?" "Right." Julian's throat tightened. Old Julian would have promised loudly. New Julian understood promises were fragile. Presence was stronger. He stepped around the swing and sat on the grass in front of her eye level. "I'm here," he said simply. Lila blinked. "For real?" Julian nodded. "For real." Lila stared at him like she was checking if the words matched the air around them. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "If I stop waiting, will it hurt less?" Julian's chest clenched. He reached out, not rushing, letting her choose. Lila placed her small hand in his. Julian didn't squeeze too tight. He just stayed. Marin's eyes filled, but she didn't wipe tears dramatically. She just exhaled like a woman who had carried everything alone and finally felt the ground share the weight. In the yard, under a quiet sky, the lesson landed without shouting. Children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who show up. And this time, Julian Ashford didn't leave. He stayed. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.